Story 11. The Passover. God sent Moses and Aaron to tell Pharaoh to let the Israelites go. They warned him that if he did not let them go, God would kill all the firstborn males of Egypt's people and animals. When Pharaoh heard this, he still refused to believe and obey God. God provided a way to save the firstborn son of anyone who believed in him. Each family had to choose a perfect lamb and kill it. God told the Israelites to put the blood of this lamb around the door of their houses. They should roast the meat, then they should quickly eat it, along with unleavened bread. He also told them to be ready to leave Egypt immediately after they ate this meal. The Israelites did everything just as God had commanded them to do. In the middle of the night, God went throughout Egypt, killing every firstborn son. All the houses of the Israelites had blood around the doors, so God passed over those houses. Everybody inside them was safe. They were saved because of the lamb's blood. But the Egyptians did not believe God or obey his commands, so God did not pass over their houses. God killed every one of the Egyptians' firstborn sons. Every Egyptian firstborn male died, from the firstborn of the prisoner in jail to the firstborn of Pharaoh. Many people in Egypt were crying and wailing because of their deep sadness. That same night, Pharaoh called for Moses and Aaron and said, "Take the Israelites and leave Egypt immediately." The Egyptian people also urged the Israelites to leave right away. Story 12. The Exodus. The Israelites were very happy to leave Egypt. They were no longer slaves, and they were going to the Promised Land. The Egyptians gave the Israelites whatever they asked for, even gold and silver and other valuable things. Some people from other nations believed in God and went along with the Israelites as they left Egypt. A tall pillar of cloud went ahead of them during the day. It became a tall pillar of fire at night. God, who was in the pillar of cloud and the pillar of fire, was always with them and guided them as they traveled. All they had to do was follow him. After a short time, Pharaoh and his people changed their minds. They wanted to make the Israelites their slaves again, so they chased after the Israelites. It was God who made them change their minds. He did this because he wanted everyone to know that he, Yahweh, is more powerful than Pharaoh and all the gods of the Egyptians. When the Israelites saw the Egyptian army coming, they realized they were trapped between Pharaoh's army and the Red Sea. They were very afraid and cried out, "Why did we leave Egypt? We are going to die." Moses told the Israelites, "Stop being afraid. God will fight for you today and save you." Then God told Moses, "Tell the people to move toward the Red Sea." Then God moved the pillar of cloud and placed it between the Israelites and the Egyptians, so the Egyptians could not see the Israelites. God told Moses to raise his hand over the sea. Then God caused the wind to push the water in the sea to the left and the right, so that there was a path through the sea. The Israelites marched through the sea on dry ground, with a wall of water on either side of them. Then God moved the cloud up and out of the way so that the Egyptians could see the Israelites escaping. The Egyptians decided to chase after them. So they followed the Israelites onto the path through the sea, but God caused the Egyptians to panic and caused their chariots to get stuck. They shouted, "Run away! God is fighting for the Israelites." The Israelites all arrived at the other side of the sea. Then God told Moses to stretch out his hand again over the water. When Moses did that, the water fell on the Egyptian army and returned to its normal place. The whole Egyptian army drowned. When the Israelites saw that the Egyptians were dead, they trusted in God. They believed that Moses was a prophet of God. The Israelites also rejoiced very much because God had saved them from dying and from being slaves. Now they were free to worship God and obey him. The Israelites sang many songs, to celebrate their new freedom, and to praise God because He saved them from the Egyptian army. God commanded the Israelites to celebrate a festival every year in order to remember how God had defeated the Egyptians and freed them from being slaves. This festival was called the Passover. In it, they had to celebrate by killing a healthy lamb, roasting it, and eating it with bread made without yeast. Story 13. God's Covenant with Israel. After God led the Israelites through the Red Sea, He led them through the wilderness to a mountain called Sinai. This was the same mountain where Moses had seen the burning bush. The people set up their tents at the base of the mountain. God said to Moses and all the people of Israel, "You must always obey me and keep the covenant I am making with you. If you do this, you will be my prized possession, a kingdom of priests, and a holy nation." For 3 days, the people made themselves ready for God to come near to them. Then God came down to the top of Mount Sinai. When He came, there was thunder, lightning, smoke, and sounds of loud trumpets. Then Moses went by himself up the mountain. Then God made a covenant with the people. He said, "I am Yahweh, your God. It is I who saved you from being slaves in Egypt. Do not worship any other god. Do not make idols, and do not worship them, because I, Yahweh, must be your only God. Do not use my name in a disrespectful way. Be sure to keep the Sabbath day holy. In other words, do all your work in 6 days. For the 7th day is a day for you to rest and to remember me. Honor your father and your mother. Do not murder. Do not commit adultery. Do not steal. Do not lie. Do not desire to have your neighbor's wife, his house, or anything that belongs to him." Then God wrote these 10 commandments on 2 stone tablets and gave them to Moses. God also gave the people many other laws and rules to follow. God promised to bless the people and protect them if they obeyed these laws, but He said He would punish them if they did not obey them. God also told the Israelites to make a large tent, the tent of meeting. He told them exactly how to make this tent and what things to put in it. He told them to make a large curtain to separate the tent into 2 rooms. God would come into the room behind the curtain and stay there. Only the high priest was allowed to go into that room where God was. The people must also make an altar in front of the tent of meeting. Anyone who had disobeyed God's law should bring an animal to that altar. A priest would then kill it and burn it on the altar as a sacrifice to God. God said that the animal's blood would cover that person's sin. In this way, God would not see that sin any longer. That person would become clean in God's sight. God chose Moses' brother Aaron and Aaron's descendants to be His priests. The people all agreed to obey the laws that God had given them. They agreed to belong to God alone and to worship only Him. For many days, Moses remained on top of Mount Sinai. He was talking with God, but the people became tired of waiting for him to return to them. So they brought gold to Aaron and asked him to make an idol they could worship instead of God. In this way, they sinned terribly against God. Aaron made a golden idol in the shape of a calf. The people began to wildly worship the idol and make sacrifices to it. God was very angry with them because of their sin. He wanted to destroy them. But Moses asked God not to kill them. God listened to his prayer and did not destroy them. Moses finally came down from Mount Sinai. He was carrying the 2 stone tablets on which God had written the 10 commandments. Then he saw the idol. He was so angry that he smashed the tablets. Then Moses beat the idol into powder, threw the powder into some water, and made the people drink the water. God sent a plague on the people, and many of them died. Moses made new stone tablets for the 10 commandments to replace the ones that he had broken. Then he climbed the mountain again and prayed that God would forgive the people. God listened to Moses and forgave them. Moses came back down the mountain with the 10 Commandments on the new tablets. Then God led the Israelites away from Mount Sinai toward the Promised Land. Story 14. Wandering in the Wilderness. God finished telling the Israelites about all the laws they must obey because of his covenant with them. Then he led them away from Mount Sinai. He wanted to take them to the Promised Land. This land was also called Canaan. God went ahead of them in the pillar of cloud, and they followed him. God had promised Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob that he would give the Promised Land to their descendants. But now there were many people groups living there. They were called Canaanites. The Canaanites did not worship or obey God. They worshipped false gods and did many evil things. God told the Israelites, "After you go into the Promised Land, you must get rid of all the Canaanites there. Do not make peace with them, and do not marry them. You must completely destroy all of their idols. If you do not obey me, you will end up worshiping their idols instead of me." When the Israelites reached the border of Canaan, Moses chose 12 men, one from each tribe of Israel. He gave the men instructions to go and spy on the land to see what it was like. They were also to spy on the Canaanites to see if they were strong or weak. The 12 men traveled through Canaan for 40 days and then came back. They told the people, "The land is very fertile and the crops are plentiful." But 10 of the spies said, "The cities are very strong and the people are giants. If we attack them, they will certainly defeat us and kill us." Immediately, Caleb and Joshua, the other 2 spies, said, "It is true that the people of Canaan are tall and strong, but we can certainly defeat them. God will fight for us." But the people did not listen to Caleb and Joshua. They became angry with Moses and Aaron and said, "Why did you bring us to this horrible place? We should have stayed in Egypt. If we go into the land, we will die in battle, and the Canaanites will make our wives and children to be slaves." The people wanted to choose a different leader to take them back to Egypt. When the people said this, God was very angry. He came to the tent of meeting and said, "You have rebelled against me, so all of you will have to wander in the wilderness. Everyone who is 20 years or older will die there and never enter the land I am giving you. Only Joshua and Caleb will enter it." When the people heard God say this, they were sorry they had sinned, so they decided to attack the people of Canaan. Moses warned them not to go because God would not go with them, but they did not listen to him. God did not go with them into this battle, so the Canaanites defeated them and killed many of them. Then the Israelites turned back from Canaan. For the next 40 years, they would wander through the wilderness. During the 40 years that the people of Israel wandered in the wilderness, God provided for them. He gave them bread from heaven, called manna. He also sent flocks of quail, which are medium-sized birds, into their camp so they could have meat to eat. During all that time, God kept their clothes and sandals from wearing out. God even miraculously made water come out of a rock for them to drink. But despite all this, the people of Israel complained and grumbled against God and against Moses. Even so, God was still faithful. He did what he promised he would do for the descendants of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. Another time, when the people did not have any water, God told Moses, "Speak to the rock, and water will come out of it." But Moses did not speak to the rock. Instead, he hit the rock twice with a stick. In this way, he dishonored God. Water came out of the rock for everyone to drink, but God was angry with Moses. He said, "Because you did this, you will not enter the Promised Land." After the Israelites had wandered in the wilderness for 40 years, all of them who had rebelled against God were dead. Then God led the people to the edge of the Promised Land again. Moses was now very old, so God chose Joshua to help him lead the people. God also promised Moses that one day he would send to the people another prophet like Moses. Then God told Moses to go to the top of a mountain so he could see the promised land. Moses saw the promised land, but God did not permit him to enter it. Then Moses died, and the Israelites mourned for 30 days. Joshua became their new leader. Joshua was a good leader because he trusted and obeyed God. Story 15. The Promised Land. At last, it was time for the Israelites to enter Canaan, the Promised Land. In that land was a city called Jericho. It had strong walls around it to protect it. Joshua sent 2 spies to that city. In that city lived a prostitute named Rahab. She hid these spies, and later she helped them to escape from the city. She did this because she believed God. They promised to protect Rahab and her family when the Israelites would destroy Jericho. The Israelites had to cross the Jordan River to enter into the Promised Land. God told Joshua, "Have the priests go first." When the priests started to step into the Jordan River, the water upstream stopped flowing, so the Israelites could cross over to the other side of the river on dry ground. After the people crossed the Jordan River, God told Joshua to get ready to attack the city of Jericho, even though it was very strong. God told the people that their priests and soldiers must march around the city once a day for 6 days. So the priests and the soldiers did this. Then on the 7th day, the Israelites marched around the city 7 more times. After they had marched around the city for the 7th time, the priests blew their trumpets, and the soldiers shouted. Then the walls around Jericho fell down. The Israelites destroyed everything in the city as God had commanded. They only spared Rahab and her family, who became part of the Israelites. When the other people living in Canaan heard that the Israelites had destroyed Jericho, they were terrified that the Israelites would attack them also. God had commanded the Israelites not to make a peace treaty with any of the people groups in Canaan. But one of the Canaanite people groups, called the Gibeonites, lied to Joshua and said they were from a place far from Canaan. They asked Joshua to make a peace treaty with them. Joshua and the other leaders of the Israelites did not ask God what they should do. Instead, they made a peace treaty with the Gibeonites. 3 days later, the Israelites found out that the Gibeonites really did live in Canaan. They were angry because the Gibeonites had deceived them, but they kept the peace treaty they had made with them because it was a promise before God. Then sometime later, the kings of another people group in Canaan, the Amorites, heard that the Gibeonites had made a peace treaty with the Israelites. So they combined their armies into one large army and attacked Gibeon. The Gibeonites sent a message to Joshua asking for help. So Joshua gathered the Israelite army, and they marched all night to reach the Gibeonites. In the early morning, they surprised the Amorite armies and attacked them. God fought for Israel that day. He caused the Amorites to be confused, and he sent large hailstones that killed many of the Amorites. God also caused the sun to stay in one place in the sky so that Israel would have enough time to completely defeat the Amorites. On that day, God won a great victory for Israel. After God defeated those armies, many of the other Canaanite people groups gathered together to attack Israel. Joshua and the Israelites attacked and destroyed them. After these battles, God gave each tribe of Israel its own section of the Promised Land. Then God gave Israel peace along all its borders. When Joshua was an old man, he called all the people of Israel together. Then Joshua reminded the people that they had promised to obey the covenant that God had made with the Israelites at Mount Sinai. The people promised to be faithful to God and obey his laws.